I'm going to let you in on a little secret, but first you have to promise not to tell anyone, especially the feds. There are actually many types of inflation. Wait a minute, don't close this video yet. As counterintuitive as it sounds, there are different types of inflation that, when understood, can make you oodles of money. But before I share this amazing investment philosophy with you, we need to step back in time and discuss why there's so much confusion around what inflation is. So, what are different types of inflation? If you've been following the blogosphere, then you may have heard a little bit about inflation, but what exactly is it? And how does it relate to the value of money, economic growth, and future investment returns? In this video, we're going to answer these questions and discuss some of the most important types of inflation. Gain an understanding of the various forms of inflation. Inflation, at its most basic level, is a rise in the cost of goods and services across the economy. Besides, who hasn't thought back to the days when rents were low and lunch was cheap? As for rising prices, who hasn't noticed them on anything from milk to movie tickets? Here, we'll take a look at the most common types of inflation, as well as the competing economic theories that explain them. Important points to make. Inflation is the rate at which the overall cost of goods and services in an economy increases over time. As a result, the purchasing power of a country's currency decreases because it no longer buys as much as it used to. If inflation rises above 3%, it could cause severe economic problems like hyperinflation or stagflation. Central banks are trying to keep inflation between 3% and 4% to stimulate economic growth. Stagflation is characterized by high inflation, slow economic growth, and high unemployment, all at the same time. Deflation occurs when prices fall sharply as a result of a surplus of money or a decline in consumer spending. As a result, businesses experience lower profits and may be forced to cut staff. Stagflation and hyperinflation are two extremes in terms of inflation. A moderate degree of inflation is good for a country's economy, even if we as consumers despise it. For the most part, central banks aim to keep inflation at 2% to 3%. The possibility of hyperinflation, a catastrophic scenario in which inflation spirals out of control, may arise if inflation rises significantly above this target range. This phenomenon has occurred numerous times in the past. Inflation in Germany during the early 1920s reached 30,000% per month, making it the most well-known example. As an even more extreme case, look no further than the country of Zimbabwe for inspiration. An estimated 79,600,000,000% increase in Zimbabwe's November 2008 monthly prices was found by economists Steve H. Hank and Alex K. F. Kwok. Also, economic stagnation and inflation, known as stagflation, can cause havoc. As a result of this type of inflation, the economy suffers from a trifecta of problems: low economic growth, high unemployment, and extremely high inflation. Stagflation is rare, but it occurred in the 1970s in the United States and the United Kingdom, much to the dismay of the central banks of both countries. As a result of the increased risks associated with fiscal and monetary policy responses, stagflation poses an especially daunting challenge to central banks. A time of stagflation makes it difficult for the central bank to raise interest rates to combat the rising cost of living. However, in times of stagflation, central banks are restricted in their ability to lower interest rates. This is because doing so would increase inflation. This means that stagflation is a checkmate for central banks, preventing them from making any further moves. Stagflation is one of the most challenging forms of inflation to control. As a result of deflation, negative inflation, also known as deflation, occurs when prices fall due to a variety of factors. As a result of a smaller currency supply, the value of money increases, lowering prices. Negative inflation can also be caused by a decrease in demand, either because there is too much supply or because of a decrease in consumer spending. Declining prices for goods and services may seem like a good thing because it makes them more affordable, but it can have a negative impact on the economy over time. Reduced profits force companies to reduce costs, which frequently entails laying off or terminating employees, thereby increasing the number of unemployed people. Which factors drive up prices? Inflation is easy to define, but what drives it is a much more difficult question. Many theories exist, but Keynesian and monetarist economics are arguably the two most influential on inflation. According to Keynesian economists, inflation is caused by rising costs of production, while monetarist economists believe it's caused by an increase in the money supply and that central banks should maintain a steady growth rate for the money supply. Keynesian economics. John Maynard Keynes, a British economist who lived from 1883 until his death in 1946, is credited with coining the term Keynesian. Even though modern Keynesian economics is still evolving, its emphasis on aggregate demand as the primary driver of economic development can be broadly described. Since fiscal and monetary policy can help achieve desired economic outcomes, adherents of this tradition advocate for government intervention in the form of fiscal and monetary policy. This school of thought believes that inflation is caused by rising costs of production or an increase in the demand for goods and services. Cost-push inflation and demand-pull inflation are two broad categories of inflation. When the prices of the inputs to production go up, it's called cost-push inflation. In order to produce goods and services, we need a variety of resources, including money, land, labor, and a healthy dose of entrepreneurialism. To maintain their profit margins in the face of rising input costs, manufacturers must raise the price of their products. On an economy-wide level, this can lead to higher prices for consumers, as producers pass on their increased costs to their customers. Production costs, in turn, drive up consumer prices. When aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, demand-pull inflation occurs. Consider, for example, a well-known product whose demand far exceeds the supply. The product's cost would rise. According to the demand-pull inflation theory, prices will rise throughout the economy if total demand exceeds total supply. Monetary economics. Milton Friedman, an American economist, is widely credited with coining the term monetarism. According to its name, monetarism focuses on the role money plays in shaping economic developments. It is particularly interested in the economic consequences of monetary policy changes. In comparison to Keynesian economists, monetarists are more pessimistic about the effectiveness of government economic intervention. Such interventions, say monetarists, run the risk of doing more harm than good, they say. In A Monetary History of the United States, 1867 to 1960, co-written with Anna J. Schwartz, Friedman and Schwartz argued that the Federal Reserve's policy decisions inadvertently exacerbated the Great Depression. Central banks should focus on keeping the nation's money supply growing at the same rate as its GDP, Friedman said. Based on this skepticism, monetary theorists, everything is about the dollar. A growing money supply, according to monetarists, is what causes inflation. According to Friedman, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. The monetarist view is perfectly encapsulated by this statement. It's not about labor costs, materials costs, or consumer demand, according to this theory, which sees inflation as the primary cause. Instead, the supply of money is the only issue. According to the quantity theory of money, the relationship between the money supply and inflation is governed by this relationship. This perspective has its roots in the following formula: M multiplied by V equals P multiplied by T, where M equals money in circulation. Money moves at a rapid rate, denoted by the symbol V, for velocity. In this context, P is the average price. T equals transaction volume. As long as the velocity of money and the volume of transactions remain constant, an increase or decrease in the supply of money will lead to an equal increase or decrease in the average price level. The relationship between the velocity of money and the volume of transactions is not as simple as it first appears, given that these two variables are never constant. Nevertheless, this equation is a useful representation of the monetarist's view that inflation is primarily caused by an increase in the money supply. What's at stake? Many forms of inflation exist, from hyperinflation and stagflation to the 5-cent and 10-cent increases that we don't even realize are happening. This shows that inflation is a far more complicated phenomenon than one might initially assume, as Keynesian and monetarist economists disagree on the root causes. To sum it all up, inflation, in general, is a negative phenomenon. But despite being seen as somewhat of a pincer move against your retirement, there are different kinds of inflation you should be aware of along with their causes and effects. The examples of inflation mentioned above, supply-side and demand-side inflation, are the most common types, but there are others that are just as important to understand. Are you ready to take on the global economy? Inflation is one of the most serious economic issues facing the United States. While some types of inflation are more obvious than others, they all impact the economy to some degree. With this in mind, investors need to take steps to protect themselves and their assets from inflation. Were you aware of what inflation is and how it affects us all? Do you have any additional information that others should know about this topic? Let us know in the comments section below. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content to transform into smart money.